particularly across eastern areas of England where high pressure is in charge at the moment, which means we've got light winds, so there's not much action to really help clear that fog out of the way. Elsewhere across parts of England and Wales, there will be some sunny spells in there to enjoy today, but it is going to be another cold feeling day across those southern and eastern parts. Temperatures really struggling for the time of year, particularly where that fog persists locally. We might see not much higher than 0 or 1 degrees Celsius. Further towards the west and the north, though, we are starting to feed in some much milder conditions. So 9 degrees Celsius out here, even for parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Here, though, it is going to be a much cloudier day. We've got outbreaks of rain starting to push their way in for the Western Isles and into the Highlands and Northern Isles also. The winds here, though, are going to be strengthening, with gales pushing their way in for the northwest as we head throughout today and into the overnight period. Locally, they could turn severe during the early hours of Monday morning as well. Those winds, though, are pushing in from a southwesterly direction all the way from the Atlantic, so they're filtering in some much milder conditions, and by the time we reach Monday morning, temperatures will be reaching double-digit figures across parts of northwestern Scotland. It's another chilly night to come, though, in the southeast. Some patchy frost is possible again for parts of East Anglia down towards Sussex and Kent also. It will be a touch cloudier across England and Wales tomorrow. The sunshine hazier here, and we're going to start to see that band of rain in the northwest slowly push its way southwards, pushing into Cumbria, parts of Anglesey, the far northwest of Wales, so damper day to come here. But still very mild in the northwest, double-digit figures widely for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but again more around 5 to 7 degrees Celsius for England and Wales. That north-south contrast is going to continue throughout the rest of this coming week as well. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000 with the Great British Giveaway. I'd say to people who want to enter or are wondering whether to enter to do it. It happens to people like me.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. The poet Edgar Fawcett once wrote, "January is here with eyes that keenly glow, a frost-mailed warrior striding a shadowy steed of snow." Indeed, the wintry conditions have wreaked havoc across the country this week, so dear viewers, shelter from the biting cold and frost by cozying up to this studio for Sunday with Michael Portillo. What has happened to our politics? Interventions on social media by Elon Musk have reopened the debate about the rape gangs who preyed on poor white girls, have made us think about what it is to be a multicultural society, have put Reform UK front and centre, and even lionised the jailed activist known as Tommy Robinson. Can a powerful foreigner set the political agenda in this country? My panel will discuss that. And later, I'll ask them whether there's any acceptable way to talk about subjects that have a racial or cultural element. A painting submitted by a member of the public to Christie's auction house has unexpectedly turned out to be a watercolour by J.M.W. Turner. Art critic Estelle Lovett will talk to me about this exciting new find. Bradford's tenure as the UK's City of Culture began on Friday with an opening ceremony in the city centre. What benefits can the accolade bring to Bradford? We'll look at what happened to previous cities that were so favoured, including Coventry and Hull, with senior culture writer at The Telegraph, Liam Kelly. And Stefan Kyriazis will join me to share the theatrical excursions that he's made during this week. But first, your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Michael, thank you very much. The top stories. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has accused the Health Secretary of attempting to conceal the reality of the grooming gangs after he claimed the public discourse could risk vilifying certain communities. Wes Streeting had said the rhetoric around grooming gangs risked causing a second New Zealand mosque massacre. Mr Farage told The Telegraph that Mr Streeting's remarks were insulting. That's now as Labour MP Dan Carden has broken ranks from Sir Keir Starmer, joining Andy Burnham in his calls for a national inquiry into the scandal. Fury over grooming gangs has reignited in recent weeks after Labour blocked a national inquiry backed by Kemi Badenoch and tech billionaire Elon Musk. Science Secretary Peter Kyle told GB News this morning that Labour are dedicated to making a change for victims.
Bill that we introduced into Parliament this week, the Child Welfare Bill, had as its central commitment multi-agency cooperation for fact. We would deliver it, and the Conservatives tried to stop it. Now, we didn't just introduce this on the back of a national debate that's happened in the last fortnight. We planned this bill in opposition. We have been drafting it in government. We implemented it last week. There are things we are doing and actions we're taking, and we will continue to do so and deliver for those victims.
The Chancellor will lead a major new drive to tackle waste and inefficiency across the public sector, which will leave no stone unturned, in an attempt to get back on the front foot after a week of turmoil in financial markets. Writing in The Telegraph, Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, said officials will work with the private sector to embrace their ideas, expertise and innovation to further our public services as part of the drive to clamp down on unnecessary spending. Rachel Reeves has been criticised, though, as she visits China to boost relations with Beijing. The Tories accusing her of having fled to China rather than explain how she'll fix the UK's economy. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride told GB News Ms Reeves' judgment has been very poor.
Should not be in China at the moment, talking to the Chinese in the way she is, saying that she's got this £120 million a year additional funding coming into the UK economy, given that the moves in the bond market recently, partly at least, substantially at least, because of the decisions that she's taken, is costing us an estimated £12 billion pounds a year. That's enough to fund 300,000 nurses, for example. So, no, I think her judgment has been very poor, and very poor judgment around the budget, which is why we are in that situation.
In other news, the Los Angeles fires are raging on as the death toll has now reached 16, with the blame directed at celebrity residents who broke water-saving rules to tend their lavish gardens. More than 100,000 people are under evacuation orders. Looters are also a persistent thorn in the side of the authorities, with criminals even dressing as firefighters in order to steal from evacuated homes. Malibu has lost one-third of its eastern edge, according to the city's mayor. Gusty winds are forecast for the coming days, potentially further fuelling the fires. A North Yorkshire police officer has died after she was struck by a lorry as she was helping at the scene of an earlier road accident. The Mayor of York and North Yorkshire and Deputy Mayor of Policing, Fire and Crime said their hearts are broken. PC Rosie Pryor was standing on the verge of the A19 at Bagby near Thirsk with the driver and passenger of one of the cars involved when the lorry collided with them yesterday morning. Ms Pryor and 41-year-old Ryan Welford from Knaresborough, who'd been involved in the first collision, both died at the scene. The 65-year-old lorry driver was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving and has been released under investigation. In other news, the Foreign Secretary has travelled to Saudi Arabia for talks on the future of Syria after the collapse of the Assad regime. David Lammy is set to offer UK expertise on humanitarian coordination during talks with Arab countries, European allies and the interim Syrian government in Riyadh today. The talks come a month after the fall of Bashar al-Assad's authoritarian regime, which left the country in the hands of rebel group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, an organisation that's banned in the UK. Before the visit, the Foreign Office said the government was committed to a Syrian-led transition to create an inclusive, non-sectarian and representative government, stressing the need to end ongoing hostilities in the northeast of the country. And train managers have launched the first of a series of 5 months of strikes on busy rail routes, causing travel disruption. There are currently picket lines outside stations, including London Euston, Liverpool and Edinburgh today in the walkout in a dispute over rest day working. Members of the RMT union at Avanti West Coast will strike every Sunday until the 25th of May. A reduced timetable will be in place on the strike days, with fewer services running during limited operating hours. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. It's back to Portillo.
Thank you very much, Tatiana Sanchez. Elon Musk has determined the political debate in the United Kingdom for more than a week now. The rape gangs comprise mainly of men of Pakistani origin, which have not been widely discussed in Britain for some time, have been the leading topic. The billionaire owner of X also withdrew support from Nigel Farage and expressed outrage over the imprisonment of Tommy Robinson, who, like the rape gangs, had dropped way down the list of things on the minds of the British people. Is this how things are now that an outside actor, a billionaire, sets Britain's political agenda, especially on topics that the establishment in Britain would rather ignore? I'm joined now by my panel, pollster and director at JL Partners, Scarlett McGuire, broadcaster Candice Holdsworth, and former advisor to Labour, Matthew Lazar. Matthew, let's start with you. Are you puzzled, are you dismayed at the way that the British political agenda is being set from outside?
Well, I think it makes all of us somewhat uncomfortable to have a billionaire from across the pond seemingly dictating it. But I think when you step back and reflect, if you actually think about this, what's the difference between Elon Musk's power now with X and, say, the power of Rupert Murdoch and the tabloid press in the 1980s, when if he or another proprietor decided they want to take up a topic and made it headlines, then suddenly that changed their political debate. And you can go all the way back to the 1920s when press proprietors wanted to put empire first and against free trade, and that put up candidates in by-elections even, some of which won. Yes, at first it makes me feel very uncomfortable. I think when you step back at it, you think that it's about the issue rather than the platform. If this had been taken up in the days when the tabloid newspapers were king, or, you know, some other way, I think if the issue didn't have resonance, then the fact that Elon Musk was saying something in itself wouldn't. Also, the novelty value of Musk will decrease, and he's also made a bit of a fool of himself with getting into the spat with Nigel. When Tommy Robinson's your last ally, you're in a bit of trouble.
Scarlett, you are a frequent commuter across the Atlantic. I wonder whether you feel that there's some permanence to this present situation. I don't mean necessarily with Elon Musk, but is it the case that a powerful individual can set the agenda. I think there is a difference with the past, with proprietors of newspapers, because it can now be almost anybody who has a lot of money and for whatever reason has a following. And what has struck me about this particular case is that the issue has been sort of plucked from history. I know there was a motivator in the present day, which was the refusal to grant a public inquiry. But nonetheless, it does seem that Musk has sort of reached into British history and brought this subject out and dangled it in front of us. And it has dominated the headlines now, what, for about 9 days?
I think there's some differences. So, first of all, I think, yes, was right that Rupert Murdoch could certainly set the agenda here with the front page of The Sun, for example. The front page of The Sun was not paid much attention to globally. And I think one of the big differences with Elon Musk and X is that, yes, it's a voice from outside of the UK, but its audience is also from outside of the UK, as well as being inside of the UK. So I've had lots of Americans, you're right, I go there a lot. I've had lots of Americans messaging me about this issue over the last few days because they have also seen it on Musk's X. So the global reach, not just from the person starting these, but the person reading these, I think certainly does matter. And I do know what you mean. I go to America very often. I'm going there tomorrow. I am very proudly British. I love this country. And sometimes it does feel like we are increasingly a cultural and political backwater of America. But I also think that part of that comes from our diminishing status on the world stage, often reflect on our economy feels in a much poorer shape, feel a lot poorer when I go over there. And I think if you want to start addressing those things and if you want to sort of come free of America's influence, then this country's going to need to start getting quite a lot better.
Candice, it was Macmillan who said, you know, the thing in politics was events, dear boy, events. We can never predict what's going to happen. But it seems to me that we've taken this unpredictability to a new level because these issues arrive almost out from outer space. Yeah. They certainly arrive from a different continent. Do you see this as permanent, or do you think we are basking in the novelty of the Musk situation?
Yeah, look, I think this situation with Elon Musk being the new billionaire owner of Twitter, megaphoning issues, which he's interested in for whatever reasons that aren't always entirely clear. But I'm very world-weary when it comes to social media itself, particularly Twitter X. I think it's always been an outrage machine. I think it's always had a very negative influence on journalism. There's that wonderful Spectator illustration that they often use with the old Twitter logo as this giant bird sort of screaming at a lone individual. And it's had a censorious effect and it's had a stifling effect, I think, on free speech and political discourse since it started. I mean, I remember the journalist Bari Weiss, when she resigned from the New York Times, she said, Twitter isn't on the masthead of the New York Times, but it is editing the New York Times. It has an outsized influence on what journalists write and what they say. And I don't feel that it's a healthy environment in which to have free speech. So that's very interesting because Elon Musk came in, and for many people like me, I liked the explicit commitment to free speech. I really did. I thought that's exactly what these platforms need because I think they do play a censorious role. But I think if you zoom back and look at it objectively, I think there is a huge conflict with him being in this position of power. One, he's the richest man in the world. Two, his proximity to the most powerful man in the world who's about to take up his role. And Elon Musk, I don't know if he's going to have a formal role, although presumably he will. There are massive conflicts there, and I don't know if he will resolve them, because it's very useful to him to have Twitter.
Matthew, you ended your last remark by saying that Elon Musk had made a fool of himself. He certainly said a lot of things that are very intemperate by the standards of normal discourse. Do you think that, are you relaxed then? Do you think he's just going to burn himself out and we will think this man is ridiculous, he overstates his case, he says things that are patently not right? We can ignore him.
Well, I think it's because he does that that we should have some hope that his voice won't become dominant in the debate. I mean, in terms of novelty value, one of the most shameful experiences in my political career is when my then boss, Ed Miliband, went to pay homage, and I mean literally pay homage, to Russell Brand, the comedian who has obviously since been in more difficulties, but at that time was regarded as pivotal with young voters. He had millions of followers on social media. We literally went to his house for a secret recording in his house of a video to be released just just before polling day, and of course now whatever Russell Brand says is taken with a huge pinch of salt, because he burned himself out, because his novelty value, dispersed, and also he then said some silly things, and people kind of saw through him. So I think there's a little bit of hope that the same thing happens with Musk. So, you know, he was doing well, but in terms of highlighting an issue that did have resonance, but then he pushes it too far, and that, I think, is the hope for us all, that he doesn't become the big voice in politics.
Scarlett, on the other hand, the British establishment did not want to speak about this subject of the rape gangs. And when I say the British establishment, I mean, obviously the Labour government didn't want to, but actually the Conservatives weren't keen to either, because during 14 years in office, they hadn't called for this inquiry either. So there is an argument for saying that when the British establishment gets itself together and decides there's a topic it doesn't want to talk about, it's brilliant that someone from the outside pushes the issue upon us and makes us talk about something that our masters don't want us to talk about.
Yeah, but it wasn't just Elon Musk intervening. I mean, I know this channel aired a documentary on it years previously to Elon Musk. There were newspapers that reported it. I appreciate that it didn't make its way. There wasn't an amendment tabled by an opposition party to have an inquiry, etc., which does sort of support your point on it. But no, I do think that there is something to be said for when, if establishment is failing its public, then any outside influence that potentially nudges in the direction could be seen as a good thing. I am uneasy about the outside influence generally, but I do think I hold politicians in quite short shrift who are now using it just as much as politicians who avoided it in the first place and were potentially too scared to talk about it, or thought it would be inconvenient to talk about it, or frankly just didn't care. I think that, you know, hold them in a suitable amount of contempt, but I also am uneasy with now politicians who potentially are using it because it is politically convenient to them, and they've smelled some weakness on the other side, and I'm very uneasy about that too, because sometimes I think that the victims can be forgotten in that.
Yes, and that'll lead us into the second part of our discussion at noon. Candice, how do politicians defend themselves against this? I mean, this is so unforeseeable.
It is.
How do you fight back against Elon Musk?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if you followed over December. He got into a massive fight with the MAGA base over the issue of H-1B visas, and he was very for it. But the Steve Bannon sort of wing of MAGA is very against it. They kind of pushed back against him very hard, and they knew their position on things, and he did back off. So, I mean, he's not unstoppable. He's not, you know, a supervillain. He's a human being. So I think if you have a genuine position on something and you know your mind on it, I think the thing to do is to push back. That's all you can do. It's the same. Look, for me, like I say, I'm world weary about social media and Twitter, all these things. I think that's the only thing you can do. You have to use your own speech and your own position. And that's the only thing you've got. That's the only thing any of us have. Or just get off Twitter. Stop worrying about it. You know, that's also the option you have.
A government spokesperson from the Home Office issued this statement: no child should ever suffer sexual abuse or exploitation, and it is paramount that we do more to protect vulnerable children, which is why we're working at pace across government to drive forward real action. Thanks to the panel, Scarlett Maguire, Candice Holsworth and Matthew Laser. They'll be back later to discuss whether there's any manner in which sensitive matters regarding ethnicity and cultural difference can be debated without being racist. Coming up, a painting submitted by a member of the public to Christie's auction house has been revealed to be by J.M.W. Turner. Art critic Estelle Lovett will be here to talk about that remarkable story. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Have you noticed that more and more stores are closing? Well, last year, apparently 13,000 stores closed for the last time on the high street.
Well, experts warn the worst is still to come for our small businesses.
Well, let's talk to retail expert Jeremy Baker. Good morning to you, Jeremy. How bad is it and what can be done?
Well, nothing can be done about it. Retail is like that. It's a boom and bust operation. So last year, let's say you had a shop and it was booming. This year, the consumer can just change their mind. They don't need to come back to your shop ever again.
Well, it is sad, Jeremy, because our high streets are the beating heart of our communities, aren't they? And for many people, I know I can relate to my high street, it is such a depressing sight, walking down there and seeing them all boarded up and closed down.
But how often do you walk down the boarded up high street? I think people move on to something else. The online world is very big. Yeah. And lots of other things are very exciting. And so people, you know, the shop, I like to go to my GP in a shopping centre and get my tests done there rather than tramp off all the way to the GP, for example. And children could go to little schools in the high street. I've seen that happen already. So lots of things could happen to the high street. It could be much more a social centre. Much more kind of like pubs, coffee shops, all that. Charities. I don't see anything wrong with charities taking over. But the idea of the shop-centred high street, finished, that's gone. Never coming back. Goodbye. It's not sad, it's just life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Christie's Auction House offers a complimentary appraisal service for members of the public to submit their paintings for valuation. And one such work, which was believed to be by John Ruskin, turned up rather a big surprise. Experts have now attributed the watercolour to J.M.W. Turner, and it is expected to fetch between $300,000 and $500,000 at auction in New York on the 4th of February. Joining me now to talk about this remarkable discovery is the art critic Estelle Lovett. Estelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This was thought to be a Ruskin. Ruskin was a very considerable polymath, an artist as well as many other things. So do you know why it was submitted for reappraisal? Was there a bit of a suspicion that it had been misidentified?
No, as you say, you know, it's a service that Christie's offer. You can submit an artwork that you have, so anyone can submit it and request an estimate. And then the auction house's appraisal service allows you space as well to describe it and ask for a valuation. And Christie's sort of looked at it behind the sheet of dirty old glass and recognised a sort of Turner-esque mood and feel and ambience about it. And because there was this close relationship between Ruskin and Turner, which is fascinating, we'll come on to that shortly, but they sort of felt, well, the brushstrokes are very strong, the line is very economic, and the colour of the palette seems to be rather Turner-esque. And then they called in a specialist paper historian who confirmed that actually the paper that was used was one that Turner favoured himself. So yes, it was originally considered to be by Ruskin, but then we discovered something more magnificent. And don't forget, what's really interesting, Now it's for sale. The lucky buyer is not just buying a picture. The lucky buyer is buying a life story, a relationship that actually changed the course of art history because of the relationship between Ruskin and Turner themselves. And Ruskin imitated a lot of Turner's style. So that's probably where the confusion is. Also, to add to that confusion, Turner held on to most of his watercolours until his death, and then they went into the National Collection. But his dealer, a guy called Thomas Griffith, had kept some back, including this wonderful image of Venice, and offered it to collectors. So, you know, even though in the 1930s it was catalogued as a Turner, we weren't sure of its whereabouts and whose private hands it was in. So it's only now, this lucky find, that we're in this position. And you said it was anywhere valued between $300,000 and $500,000. It could well go for more than that, 10 times more. Don't forget, just in 2023, a watercolour similar to this by Turner's sold for $1 million.
Yes, that could happen. Let's talk a little bit about the subject. You said that one of the reasons they were able to be fairly confident about the attribution was because of the paper. I think the subject matter too, because, I mean, Turner did paint approaches to Venice on more than one occasion, did he not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Turner did the grand tour and he travelled around Europe, as was fashionable for top-notch artists at the time. And this Venetian scene, it's entitled The Approach to Venice, or Venice from the Lagoon. And it was painted during Turner's third and final visit to Venice. And it's a lovely watercolour, very delicate, of an incoming storm. And we know how much Turner favoured and loved storms. There's gorgeous shades of blue and green, and the way that Turner would work, which again gave it away as the master hand of Turner, is Turner's scumbling technique was built up from very thin washes of colour that he dragged across the picture using his thumb and his nail to scratch through this paper to expose the layers coming through underneath. So it's almost as if the light behind the storm clouds are bursting through from underneath, and then he drag a brush load of paint across it for texture. Actually, interestingly enough, although not in this one, but he was so adventurous, which this piece shows, that sometimes he added mashed female cochineal beetles to his red to make it look even redder. But, you know, he loved storms, he loved daylight, he's known as the painter of light. He cherished the sun. He believed the sun is God. He influenced the Impressionists and the abstract expressionists, so much to the extent that, you know, it's a lot of weight to carry on Ruskin's shoulders, even though we know that Ruskin was a great valuer of Turner, and which is why he wrote Modern Painters, to stick up for Turner and the critics that said, oh, has Turner lost his mind? You know, Turner's paintings look like they've been painted by a man without hands, all smudging and splashing and scrawling and twisting and impressionist. So Ruskin was a great admirer of him. Also, what's nice, and the new owner might want to have a look at, that amongst the paint representing and meaning all sorts of things, it said that he also used a little bit of soap suds and a bit of cream, a bit of custard, not custard creams, but cream and custard, a bit of dust and a bit of whitewash. But they said it lacked finish. So Ruskin was his greatest admirer. I'm sure Ruskin would have bought it if he was alive today.
That's so interesting, and we shall see how, when it does, it may indeed go for much more than that estimate when it comes up for sale in New York. I think I said it was on the 14th. Thank you very much, Estelle Lovett.
Thank you.
Bradford's time as the UK City of Culture began on Friday. The senior culture writer at The Telegraph, Liam Kelly, will join me to talk about what the title really means. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News. See you soon.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. Misty and murky start to the day for some of us. There is fog out there with light winds courtesy of high pressure. That does mean the fog could linger for a good while throughout today, particularly eastern areas of England, also Northern Ireland. Some quite dense fog patches around, so it is worth taking care if you are about to head out and travel at all. There will be, though, some sunny spells around once those fog areas do manage to clear off, particularly across parts of England and Wales. Temperatures, though, still a little below par for where we'd normally expect them to be for the time of year, particularly in the far southeast of England, struggling in places to get above much of 2-3 degrees Celsius. But further towards the west, we're starting to see the ingress of some southwesterly winds, and that is feeding in much milder conditions, so 8-9 degrees Celsius possible here. Those southwesterly winds, though, will really quite strengthen for the northwest of Scotland, particularly around the Outer Hebrides and in the Highlands. We could start to see some gales developing during the afternoon and evening period. We'll also see outbreaks of rain moving its way in across Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland as well, turning damper and wetter to end the day here. We will manage to stay dry across parts of England and Wales, but again, the odd fog patch is possible. We will lose the frost compared to some recent nights, so it will be milder for all of us, but still low single figures for parts of England. And again, once that fog does manage to clear its way off, it will be parts of central eastern areas of England that see the best chance of some sunshine throughout tomorrow as well. Further towards the north and west, though, some heavier outbreaks of rain swinging their way in, a much wetter day here, and those southwesterly winds still very persistent, so it is going to be a noticeably mild day for the time of year. Double-digit figures for Northern Ireland and Scotland, which could lead to some snow melt of the snow that has fallen over the last week or so, so potentially some surface water issues as that falls over the next few days to watch out for. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Bradford was selected as the 2025 UK City of Culture back in 2022, following predecessors Hull, Coventry and Londonderry. Officials say that the title will generate 6,500 new jobs, attract 3.3 million visitors and boost local businesses in the city by almost £140 million. But if we look at Coventry's time in the spotlight, it seems that the results may fall far short of such expectations. Organisers there raised only £600,000 in ticket sales from 700 events, despite receiving more than 20 million in grants and donations. So what ultimately is the point of the accolade? How will it help Bradford? Senior cultural writer at The Telegraph, Liam Kelly, returns to the programme. You're very welcome to discuss this subject. Now, first of all, just to be clear, this is not European City of Culture, this is UK City of Culture, and the two things are different.
They're absolutely different. The City of Culture programme in the UK was set up after Liverpool was European Capital of Culture in 2008. It was seen to have done really rather well. There was loads of investment, loads of great events. Paul McCartney was playing, that sort of thing. It was really great, and that's an EU programme that Liverpool had won, and the UK government, under Andy Burnham as Culture Secretary at the time, said, why don't we do something like this more regularly for British cities?
So it appears that these programmes can be successful. They can produce lasting benefits. But I think you're arguing, are you not, that the UK programme has not done so far?
Not so far. I don't think anybody would reasonably say that, with the best will in the world, Londonderry, Hull or Coventry are sort of become cultural hubs off the back of being City of Culture. Bradford will, I'm sure, have a nice time. But whether there's lasting change, I'm really sceptical of that, because the European programme came with cash awards, that sort of thing. You could draw on European development funding. And when you get the UK City of Culture title, you have to go out and do a lot of fundraising, get sort of local businesses on board and that sort of thing.
Many of us have not experienced these things at all. What actually happens? There's an opening ceremony, which I believe has occurred, and then what happens for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so there was an opening ceremony on Friday night in Bradford in -3 temperatures, so that was all outdoors. So the people who booked that were either optimistic or naive, I suspect.
Or not meteorologists.
Possibly not. The rest of the programme in Bradford, for instance, this year, David Hockney's launching a nationwide drive to get people drawing. There are going to be art installations on the moors that inspired the Brontes, which is very nearby. There's lots of community things, there's sort of community choirs, that sort of thing. The odd exhibition, I think the National Media Museum's just reopened in Bradford this week, and there's going to be exhibitions and so on there as well.
But you don't see 6,500 jobs, you don't see hundreds of millions of investment. Do you see, what was it, 3 million visitors, I think they said?
Well, there might be, whether there's 3 million visitors, I don't know. I mean, that's, when you look at the, when you look at the pictures from the previous Cities of Culture versus what they actually delivered, there's often quite a large gap between numbers of visitors, numbers of, the amount of money spent in hotels and bars and restaurants and so on, and the reality of what actually happens.
So what goes wrong, do you think? Why do they fall short of expectations?
Well, part of the reason, I think, Michael, is when, and I was speaking to a lot of people writing about this week, in Coventry, for instance, the sense I got from people who live there and are involved in the arts and the local community, they were saying to me, we had a really good idea for what we wanted to do, but then when we got the City of Culture title, lots of sort of London-based consultants would come in, tell us how to do things. It was little things like changing the logo without really consulting the local people. Mm-hmm. And the sense is that it's a bit of a travelling circus that rolls into town and, doesn't leave much of a legacy once it rolls out again.
Is there an issue with elitism as well? Possibly,
yeah. That's been the case in the arts for a very long time, the discussion about whether things are elite or not. Something that the Arts Council wrestles with all of the time.
I mean, I'm not against elitism, but I'm not sure that elite art projects are the best way of raising an economy.
No, well, top down, I'd agree. I think it'd be a much better legacy. So Coventry had raised £20 million, I think, as you said in your introduction, £600,000 in ticket sales. Would have probably been better for Coventry as a place to do arts and culture, to invest in lots of small, art schools, art colleges, drama clubs, community events, that sort of thing that people there could do, rather than the esoterica that gets programmed for a year and then not much happens afterwards.
Yeah. There's a marvellous cinema in Bradford, isn't there? Is it the Odeon?
The Odeon, yeah.
I did a programme about it. It is a truly spectacular building. Is that going to play a part in this year of culture?
No. It should. And you will have seen it. It's a really gorgeous building, and it's been refurbished at great cost. It was meant to cost about £20 million, and the people who run the NEC in Birmingham were going to operate it as a theatre and arts space. The costs, as so often happens, have ballooned. It's more like £50 million now. The council in Bradford hasn't got anybody to operate the theatre, so we have this ironic situation, I suppose, where Bradford is a city of culture, but one of the most interesting cultural places in Bradford isn't actually going to be open for anything, as far as I'm aware, for the entire year.
It's rather odd then, I mean, given the research that you've done, I mean, this information is readily available, that this programme goes on. Why does it go on if the evidence of success is so limited?
I think there's a couple of reasons. The people who, I suppose, the usual suspects on the sort of the bandwagon roll along, London-based consultancies, people who talk to the culture department, that sort of thing. They always sort of wax lyrical about it. I think if you're in a place like Bradford, you would, bet on your city being able to buck the trend. But I know that there were a lot of towns and cities that were bidding for this or planning on bidding for this when Bradford was picked, and they dropped out because the costs of bidding were so high and they just didn't think they'd actually get a return on what they were having to do.
If I were a minister, I said to you, Liam, you've said that this sort of programme can succeed because the European programme succeeded with Liverpool, but you've also said this sort of programme can fail as it has in Coventry and Hull and Derry, Londonderry. So what is the answer? Tell me as a minister what it is they want to do to change the programme to make it work.
I think there should be much more focus on what people in the local areas actually want from the arts, rather than getting lots of people, you know, I keep saying London-based consultancies, there are loads of them, and they've been involved in Bradford, they were involved in Coventry, the same people were involved in all of them. It'd be much more useful, I think, to take the money and just invest in the provision of arts. Because I think Bradford, as a city, gets about... institutions of Bradford get about £3 million a year from the Arts Council. So if Bradford is able to raise 20 million for City of Culture, that could do amazing things.
Yeah. Without all the hullabaloo, without all the shows. Liam, thank you very much. Thanks for your very interesting investigatory work, and thanks for being on the programme again. Coming up, Stefan Kyriazis will be live to report on his latest prowl through the theatres of London's West End. But first, if you're in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're about to jet off to the Mediterranean for some winter sun, then west is certainly best at this time. It's high pressure that's in charge across parts of Iberia into southern France to provide relatively fine conditions at the moment, but further towards Italy and around the Adriatic towards Turkey as well, we've currently got some heavy rain, even heavy snowfall across inland areas. This will be continuing over the next couple of days or so, but is expected to ease during the forthcoming week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Before she even met Prince Harry, her passion was sharing recipe tips, lifestyle, wellness techniques, because she had a blog, quite a successful blog actually, called The Tig. Of course, that had to be shut down when she became a working member of the royal family. We all know the turmoil that happened with Megxit. Now that her and Harry have come out the other side of that and have signed multi-million-pound deals with Netflix and others, this is the proof in the pudding, pardon the pun, and it is basically, I suspect, the TIG 2.0, because we've got everybody, she has managed to get everybody talking about this. You know, the royal family has been dragged through turmoil over the last few years because partly due to Harry and Meghan's decision, partly due to the royal family's decision, but this is kind of what's come out the other side.
Which is a load of nonsense. I mean, the fact, because it's all totally fake, isn't it? I mean, it's not her house, it's not her kitchen. She clearly doesn't spend her days picking strawberries and collecting honey from bees. I mean, the whole thing's just a fabrication.
Well, it's Netflix fantasy, isn't it? So I think any lifestyle programme such as this tends to not be filmed in the host's house. It's reportedly a $5 million rented house. The cooker itself is worth about $15,000. Even the pans are about $80 as well that she is using. So yes, Stephen, you're right. It is kind of fake and fantasy, but then, of course, that's how these lifestyle programmes are made. It's whether the question will be when you watch the series, if you decide to watch the series, is Meghan trying to portray herself as this authentic self, or is she going to make it clear that, you know, this is just like the best bits of her life? But she's got lots of celebrity friends involved in it, including her makeup artists and others as well. Prince Harry makes an appearance. Of course he does. Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us.
We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Stefan Kyriazis is with me now to talk about his latest strolling through the doors of London's theatres into the land of make-believe.
In fact, I've been bobbing, Michael, I think it might be fair to say. I've been bobbing along and all will be revealed. And I just want to say, there was a time recently when, I've gone through like Long Day's Journey into Night, Waiting for Godot, Juno and the Paycat, The Tempest. It's been, my poor battered heart almost couldn't go on, Michael. But never fear, Celine is here, and I even have a little picture for you to show you at the press night. It's very butch, so brace yourself.
So, this is a show called Titanic, by the look of it.
Hopefully my mother is not watching. Yes, and it is the story of Titanic with Celine Dion involved, and we've got a little bit of the trailer where she actually explains kind of what's going on.
I will never forget the day I got on board of Titanic. There were so many people waiting to get on the ship that day.
But Celine Dion, you just sang the theme song to the movie. You weren't actually on the Titanic.
Oh, was I?
More explanation on that. And by the way, can that be sustained for a whole show?
This is serious theatre, Michael. This is high art, I will have you know. It's an hour and 40 with no interval. And yeah, most of us, if there was a caveat or a quibble, could have done with an interval because it is ridiculously funny. Honestly, my sides hurt from laughing.
Oh, great.
And it's outrageous and it's rude. It's, shocker, very camp. And basically, Celine, she tells everyone she was there in 1776, which is obviously not when the Titanic went down, but she just makes everything up. You still have the Leo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet characters falling in love with her mean, rich husband-to-be and her grasping mother. The ship's captain, who just gets referred to as Victor Garber all the time because that's the actor that played him, and Unsinkable Molly Brown is Kathy Bates. It's basically like a mad screwball, cabaret, drag show, student review madness. It feels like it's always about to fall apart, and it doesn't. And I would say that is actually the trailer from North America, because there isn't one yet for the UK. And it's fun, and you can see what's going on. I'm not biased. The UK cast is better. I've watched some of these clips. The UK cast is West End top-tier performers. Sure. There's Rob Houchen, that was the lead in Les Mis, Luke Jordan-Gage, who was the leader in Bonnie and Clyde, Heathers, various other shows. And they're doing Celine Dion songs, and they're doing ridiculous comedy, and then they absolutely belt out a Celine Dion song, gets a standing ovation, then we go back to silliness. Someone plays the Titanic, Tina Turner comes in, Peebo Bryson gets on board to sing Beauty and the Beast with Celine, because he was there apparently as well. They have much fun making fun of all the Irish stereotypes that were in the film. So they're all kind of Super Mario and terribly Irish.
So is all the music Celine Dion?
Yes, but also you kind of get Beauty and the Beast because she sang a song from that. And then no, because you get Tina Turner, and I can't spoil why, so you get a couple of Tina Turner songs, just because, when you're on the Titanic. And it all makes perfect sense, and you literally go with it. Possibly, since there's no interval, have a stiff drink before you go in, and just be ready, and then just go with it. I laughed and laughed, and it was one of those ones that I've been to quite a few of these serious things recently, and there's a sort of ovation, or not really an ovation. People leapt. The girl playing Celine Dion is stunning. She does all the kind of Celine Dion things, but also her kind of folksy, kitschy little... I just want to say you are my favourite. I am doing this for the mothers, the fathers and the children, which is basically everybody.
So you're really excited about it? It's
I
really fun.
loved it. That's on at the Criterion.
Any idea for how long?
Until March the 30th.
March the 30th.
And I would say, go... all of us, all the reviews agreed, we need something like this at the moment. We've had such a run of serious shows. It's January, the world, etc. So something like this, it's just fun. You come out happy, and that for me is worth more than, I'm sorry, some heavy theatre. So I loved it.
That's absolutely fabulous. You have got a couple of other things to mention to us, which will be kind of also rands, I think, by comparison with this.
Well, the next one is, these are just previews. These haven't opened yet, but we're getting... I'm sailing away out of London, Michael, and we're going up to Leicester. Leicester Curve, fantastic regional theatre, puts on lots of original productions. They're taking over from Australia and then the States the Muriel's Wedding, the film, the musical, and staging it up in Leicester. I'm hoping that will tour and then probably come to London. We've got, again, a little clip for that.
I got it! Muriel! Muriel? Looks like I'm next. My wedding day is ruined! You're terrible, Muriel.
I'm raising the tone, Michael. This is what you bring me on for.
Is that what it looks like on the stage in Leicester? Does it actually look like that?
Yes, so that is Leicester. And it's basically, the film was the P.J. Hogan hilarious film back in the day with Toni Collette and Rachel Griffiths. It's the two outsider girls that become best friends and take on sort of the mean girls of Porpoise Spit, the attractive town that they all live in. The catch with that one, always the same, is lots of ABBA songs. Benny and Bjorn gave their permission, so you will get Mamma Mia and Dancing Queen in it. And basically, looking at that, it pretty much looks like Mamma Mia the musical to me. It's just going to be sunny, bright, fun. The Curve has a really fantastic track record, so I'm really excited about that. And that is at the Leicester Curve from April the 10th. And then I think we're going to see, but they've had a history of stuff coming to London, so that, again, very much looking forward to.
But regional touring would be absolutely great as well.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking of which, bring us on to our last one, The Last Laugh. Now, this is Tommy Cooper, Bob Monkhouse and Eric Morecambe, obviously imagined in a changing room somewhere together, and they're chatting, they're sort of competing and rivaling it out. Then they get into discussions of what is comedy and each trying to show their brand of comedy. It's sort of driven by the Bob Monkhouse character, who is aware that he's not the natural talent of the three. The other two are much more, he's the kind of grafter, so there's kind of melancholy to that. And then you start getting little anecdotes and parts of their lives. It was a short film back in 2017, I think, and it's by Paul Hendy. Then they've just done this staged version up at the Edinburgh Fringe. Huge smash, huge hit. So they're bringing it down. First of all, I think it starts at Brighton Theatre Royal on the 11th of Feb. Then it comes to London, and then it is pretty much touring until August. I think it's going to be for certain those of us that remember the three of them. But all three of the actors, which is Damien Williams playing Tommy Cooper, Simon Cartwright playing Bob Monkhouse, Bob Golding playing Eric Morecambe, they've all played these roles in one-man shows before. So they all have a history and a connection with the character. And so this writer came along and put them together in a short film, and now they're expanding it into a stage show. So I think, for me, you know, we've seen how well Fawlty Towers has done and things like that. Nostalgia, great time. Nostalgia always comes when times are hard. But also, I think it's an interesting look at the three of them, but apparently also very funny. So that I'm looking forward to as well.
Fantastic, Stefan.
Yeah.
But your great enthusiasm for Titanic has been noted. So, that concludes the first hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo, but do please rejoin me at noon. My panel will return to debate whether there is any means by which questions of ethnicity and cultural difference can be discussed, which is not racist. We'll investigate the row at the Royal Society of Literature, an institution which felt that were it to voice support for Salman Rushdie, who was almost stabbed to death by an Islamist terrorist, that might give offence. Award-winning photographer Cambridge Jones will join me to discuss his new exhibition on the fall of the Berlin Wall. And Sir Nicholas Kenyon, the former director of the BBC Proms, will discuss conductor Gustavo Dudamel and the legacy of El Sistema, Venezuela's social action music programme from which Dudamel himself emerged. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News. See you soon.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, this is your latest GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. It's a misty start for some of us where we do have fog patches in play, particularly across eastern areas of England where high pressure is in charge at the moment, which means we've got light winds, so there's not much action to really help clear that fog out of the way. Elsewhere across parts of England and Wales, there will be some sunny spells in there to enjoy today, but it is going to be another cold feeling day across those southern and eastern parts. Temperatures really struggling for the time of year, particularly where that fog persists locally. We might see not much higher than 0 or 1 degrees Celsius. Further towards the west and the north, though, we are starting to feed in some much milder conditions. So 9 degrees Celsius out here, even for parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Here, though, it is going to be a much cloudier day. We've got outbreaks of rain starting to push their way in for the Western Isles and into the Highlands and Northern Isles also. The winds here, though, are going to be strengthening with gales pushing their way in for the northwest as we head throughout today and into the overnight period. Locally, they could turn severe during the early hours of Monday morning as well. Those winds, though, are pushing in from a southwesterly direction all the way from the Atlantic, so they're filtering in some much milder conditions, and by the time we reach Monday morning, temperatures will be reaching double-digit figures across parts of northwestern Scotland. It's another chilly night to come, though, in the southeast. Some patchy frost is possible again for parts of East Anglia down towards Sussex and Kent also. It will be a touch cloudier across England and Wales tomorrow. The sunshine hazier here, and we're going to start to see that band of rain in the northwest slowly push its way southwards, pushing into Cumbria, parts of Anglesey, the far northwest of Wales, so damper day to come here. But still very mild in the northwest, double-digit figures widely for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but again more around 5 to 7 degrees Celsius for England and Wales. That north-south contrast is going to continue throughout the rest of this coming week as well. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever, an incredible £50,000. That's tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this year. What would you spend it on? £50,000 could buy those treats you've always dreamed of having. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we're going to introduce you to Liam Wildish. Liam, well, I'd like to think he's a friend of mine because I follow him on Instagram, on TikTok there as well.
You're a big fan, aren't you?
Big fan, because there's what he does. He's a cleaner. He cleans signs. But the thing is, he's not employed by councils or whatever. He does this voluntarily. And you sort of think to yourself, well, who cleans these signs? Why have these signs been allowed to get into this terrible state of disrepair and filthiness?
So basically, long story short, about 6 years ago, I used to be a window cleaner. In the community where I lived, I noticed all of the road signs were filthy, and I was perfectly equipped to clean them. So basically, I cleaned the road signs as a bit of a thank you to the community and sort of make a little bit of awareness of my window cleaning business at the time. Yeah. Sort of cleans up the area, makes the road safer, and that's kind of how that started. And people found it like a really satisfying sort of approach. So that sort of led on to today of a video in cleaning the dirty road signs and making sort of satisfying content with it as well.
What is the equipment? What have we got here?
So this is a water-fed pole system connected to a backpack, which is what feeds the water through the end of the brush there. It's perfectly equipped to basically remove this green, dirty, it's like a mildew build-up that you get on the signs.
Yeah.
As you can see, this is like extremely effective at removing so.
So GB News viewers, if they spot a particularly grisly sign in their area, then they can get in touch.
They can do, yeah.
And Liam Wilder's the sign guy can sort you out.
if you find Liam the sign guy online, drop me a message, let me know, and I'll add you to my list of places.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. The poet T.S. Eliot wrote of the current season in a manner that you might think more poetic than real. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow. So, while snow falls and the frost bites across the country, overcome the cold in the warm welcome that is offered to you here on Sunday with Michael Portillo. There'll be no hunkering down as we bravely address the unsayable. Those who call attention to the gangs made up of predominantly men of Pakistani origin who rape white children are called right and racist. But was it not racist that the police failed to investigate their crimes for fear of damaging community relations or indeed of being called racist themselves? My panel will discuss whether there is any approach to these subjects and any language that can be used that avoids racism. The Royal Society of Literature, which feared that it might cause offence if it supported Salman Rushdie after he nearly lost his life to a terrorist knifeman, has been embroiled in further chaos this week after two of its chiefs announced their departures. Associate editor at The Critic, Sebastian Milbank, will join me to discuss the row. Award-winning photographer Cambridge Jones will be live in the studio to talk about his new exhibition on the fall of the Berlin Wall and to share some of his extraordinary prints from that momentous episode. And former director of the BBC Proms, Sir Nicholas Kenyon, will be with me to discuss his interview with Gustavo Dudamel, the star of Venezuela's El Sistema, ahead of his appearances with the baton at the Barbican this week. But before all of that, your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Michael, thank you very much and good afternoon. We start this news bulletin with some breaking news this hour that a man has been arrested after the attempted abduction of a 3-year-old girl in Wolverhampton. The 37-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of attempted kidnap yesterday after the incident, which happened in Leicester Street at around 5:15 on Thursday afternoon, according to West Midlands Police. The girl was not injured during the incident. More on this story just as soon as we get it into the newsroom. Elsewhere, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has accused the Health Secretary of attempting to conceal the reality of the grooming gangs after he claimed the public discourse could risk vilifying certain communities. Wes Streeting had said the rhetoric around grooming gangs risked causing a second New Zealand mosque massacre, which killed more than 50 people. Mr Farage told The Telegraph that Mr Streeting's remarks were insulting. That's now as Labour MP Dan Carden has broken ranks from the Prime Minister, joining Andy Burnham in his calls for a national inquiry into the scandal. Fury over grooming gangs has reignited in recent weeks after Labour blocked a national inquiry backed by Kemi Badenoch and the tech billionaire Elon Musk. Science Secretary Peter Kyle told GB News Labour are dedicated to making a change for victims.
Bill that we introduced into Parliament this week, the Child Welfare Bill, had as its central commitment multi-agency cooperation for fact. We would deliver it, and the Conservatives tried to stop it. Now, we didn't just introduce this on the back of a national debate that's happened in the last fortnight. We planned this bill in opposition. We have been drafting it in government. We implemented it last week. There are things we are doing and actions we're taking, and we will continue to do so and deliver for those victims.
In other news, the Chancellor will lead a major new drive to tackle, quote, waste and inefficiency across the public sector, which will leave no stone unturned, they say, in an attempt to get back on the front foot after a week of turmoil in financial markets. Writing in The Telegraph, Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury,
said officials will work with the private sector to embrace their ideas, their expertise and innovation to further our public services as part of the drive to clamp down on unnecessary spending. Rachel Reeves has been criticised, though, as she visits China to boost relations with Beijing. The Tories accusing her of having fled to China rather than explain how she'll fix the UK's economy. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride told GB News this morning the Chancellor's judgment has been very poor.
Should not be in China at the moment, talking to the Chinese in the way she is, saying that she's got this £120 million a year additional funding coming into the UK economy, given that the moves in the bond market recently, partly at least, substantially at least, because of the decisions that she's taken, is costing us an estimated £12 billion pounds a year. That's enough to fund 300,000 nurses, for example. So, no, I think her judgment has been very poor, and very poor judgment around the budget, which is why we are in that situation.
The UK Health Security Agency has extended its cold weather health alert for all of England until Tuesday. Amber alerts will now run until the 14th of January, meaning a rise in deaths, particularly among those aged 65 and over, or with health conditions is likely, the agency also says. Temperatures dropped to minus 13.9 degrees overnight last night, but the Met Office has also said that the cold spell is coming to an end. British law has not changed and tech giants must still obey it, the Science Secretary has said in its response to Meta's decision to do away with content moderation teams. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced on Tuesday that his social media platforms would replace their fact-checking program with a community note system similar to that of Elon Musk's X platform. Mr. Zuckerberg said the move was about restoring freedom of expression. However, online safety campaigners have expressed concern that this will allow misinformation to spread more easily and leave children and young people vulnerable to harmful content. Elsewhere, the Los Angeles fires are raging on as the death toll now reaches 16, with the blame directed at celebrity residents who broke water-saving rules to tend their lavish gardens. More than 100,000 people are under evacuation orders. Looters are also a persistent thorn in the side of the authorities, with criminals even dressing as firefighters in order to steal from evacuated homes. Malibu has lost 1/3 of its eastern edge, according to the city's mayor. Gusty winds are forecast for the coming days, potentially further fueling the fires. And finally, train managers have launched the first of a series of 5 months of strikes on busy rail routes, causing travel disruption. There are currently picket lines outside stations including London Euston, Liverpool and Edinburgh today in the walkout in their dispute over rest day working. Members of the RMT union at Avanti West Coast will strike every Sunday until the 25th of May. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
Thank you, Tatiana Sanchez. Elon Musk has forced Britain to discuss the rape gangs again. Many people in the British establishment would prefer not to, partly because the crimes and the failure to deal with the perpetrators properly disgrace our country, partly also because we seem incapable of discussing this without hurling mud at each other. Those who raise the question of those crimes may well be described as far-right or racist. Whistleblowers were abused in such terms as the rapes continued. Yet if one section of our society is less likely to be prosecuted because of its skin colour or culture, in inverted commas, is that not supremely racist? It's depressing to witness both injustice and the stifling of debate. Can my panel do any better? Can it discuss these issues without tumbling into stereotypes, racism and two-tierism? Well, let's see, as I welcome back pollster and director at Jail Partners Scarlett Maguire, broadcaster Candice Holdsworth and former Labour advisor Matthew Lazar. Scarlett, first of all, do we have any polling evidence that suggests how the public would like this discourse to continue and be conducted?
We have
polling evidence, not on the grooming gang specifically yet, although I think we will be coming out with some of that soon, so keep an eye on that. But generally, yes, actually, there is quite a lot of polling that we've conducted about how the public feel about issues of immigration and integration, for example, and multiculturalism. And we actually, it's a while ago now, but in the autumn of last year, Suella Braverman, the then former Home Secretary, Conservative Home Secretary, went and gave a speech in Washington, which is maybe telling given our conversation last hour, but she gave a speech in Washington, and the headline from that speech was that she'd said multiculturalism had failed. Back in the UK, throughout most of the press, not all of the press, this was met with very pronounced criticism. Rishi Sunak then came out and disavowed it and said, no, multiculturalism in Britain is a great thing, and it's working well. Not those exact words, but something to that effect. And it caused a humongous stir. We polled every statement that she made in that speech, which seemed to be controversial. And I think, maybe surprisingly to some people reading that polling, we found that actually the public were more in agreement than not with Suella Braverman. So, for example, the statement multiculturalism has failed. Not a majority of Brits, but a plurality of Brits agreed with that statement rather than disagreed with it. And likewise, statements about the way in which illegal immigration and integration is handled in this country. And I think it's quite striking because to me there felt like there was a fundamental disconnect between the way in which the speech was received in the press and the reality. You might say it's an unfortunate or a wrong, people are wrong to think these things, but the reality of public opinion in the UK. And I think that gulf is part of then what spurs, yes, both the reticence and the nervousness to speak about these issues, and then also the strength of feeling on the other side. And I think if you're a politician that wants to make a strong case for multiculturalism, then you have to start with that and be able to acknowledge these issues and open and honest debate if you're going to make any progress at all.
Candice, we heard in the news just now that Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has been saying that some people making these statements about what's happened risk causing attacks on mosques along the lines of what happened in New Zealand some time ago. Now, some people might think that this is a typical example of what we're discussing here. Someone moving in to close down the debate by saying that any mention of it is racist. Other people might say, no, indeed, these things do happen. Mosques do get attacked. And therefore, it's quite right that he should call our attention to this. Is there any hope that we can have a balanced discussion on this?
I think so. I think there is. I mean, I've been following this story for a long time, and I think people are focusing a lot on this particular facet of the debate, the community that the perpetrators belong to. But I think there's so many other things that we could look at. We could look at class in this country. What class did these young girls belong to? The fact that they were girls. A lot of the people said that people were afraid to talk about this because they were afraid of being called racist. But a lot of the people I've spoken to who've worked with these girls at the grassroots level say, no, there was also something else going on. The disregard with which these girls, they were treated with, like 12-year-old girls were viewed with contempt and a complete lack of love. And it wasn't just simply that people were afraid of being called racist. They looked at these girls as the lowest of the low. They looked at them as scum. And I think that's also something we really need to contend with, that there are also issues of misogyny going on, and there was also issues of, real sort of class contempt. These are people who these are girls we don't need to worry about. They called it lifestyle choices. They said that 12 and 13-year-old girls were making lifestyle choices. So I think absolutely the sort of the racial element is something we need to discuss, and I think we need to have that conversation. We mustn't let it seg into contempt for Muslims overall. We need to look specifically at what went on in those communities, because I think that is something that's missing in the debate. There were very specific dynamics that went on in those communities, which is why it happened. But I think there are also so many other things that we shouldn't blind ourselves to as well. I think, people would say that I was afraid of being called a racist, but what they won't admit to is that I kind of looked at these girls like they kind of, they brought it on themselves. There was victim blaming as well.
Matthew, let's take the specific example of Wes Streeting today. Do you think his statement, that this conversation could lead to danger for mosques. Do you see that as closing down the debate? Do you think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to say?
Well, I saw Wes's remarks and I saw the headline and I thought, oh no, and then I read the whole of his interview and actually I felt a lot better about it. I think what he was saying is that the tone of the debate over the last week or so has been getting out of hand, that it's been, it seems to have been sort of exploding, but actually what he was absolutely insistent in the remarks, in the sort of detailed remarks, that we must have this debate, that we need to call out that clearly, many of these gangs have been of people of British Pakistani heritage. So, I mean, the headline troubled me. I think it was particularly about the conversation over the last few days, not having what you were saying is a nuanced but open and frank conversation about the issue, which we must have, because I would say to the left generally, this is a pivotal moment. I would almost say to Wes, actually, one of the reasons that the debates exploded and got a little sort of leery over the last few days is because for too long, not Wes, but people on the left liberal opinion have, maybe because they thought it was well-meaning, been trying to close the debate down and automatically saying that any discussion is racist of this issue, and that's complete nonsense. So in terms of your sort of key question of can we find a language to do this, I don't think it's a question of can we, I think we have to, because I think if we don't, we're just pushing the debate onto the fringes and the extremes, those who would try and close it down from one side, or on the other side who would try and exploit it for purposes, people like Tommy Robinson, whose purposes I don't find very appetising.
Scarlett, let's pick up from what Matthew says. He says we have to find a way of discussing this. Do you think that figures right of centre in the last week have covered themselves in glory in the way they've discussed it?
Trying to think of specific examples in ways in which they haven't. Again, as I said, I think I said in the last hour, I am uneasy with people who didn't seem to pay particular attention to this or have a problem with this when they were in power and when they had when they were able to do this, and now are using it as an attack line or something else. Because again, as Candice spoke to, I think the victims get lost in that. I know that there was, for example, Robert Jenrick was coming out and talking and was being asked questions about cultures and whether there are some cultures that have inferior values to the cultures that we have here.
Let's take that as a little example. Robert Jenrick was suggesting that you would not allow immigration from countries which had, cultures which he thought were locked in a past century. I mean, was that a practical suggestion?
I'm not sure if he was suggesting that. I think that was. I'd have to double check. I think that was something that was certainly being put to him that he was inferring as part of a policy. But that put to the side, I think, rather than thinking about whether there are particular countries who may or may not have cultures that subscribe to ours, and therefore whether they should have a different immigration policy, I do think that there is certainly amongst the public a desire to make sure that even if you don't call it cultural norms, that a certain set of values should be subscribed to here. And the perpetrators of these crimes, from whatever race, these absolutely heinous and disgusting crimes, should face the full force of justice. And I think not only then perpetrators of these as terrible crimes, but even on a different level, if there are people that are using their positions to bully other people into silence or whatever it may be, that they are treated in a way that says that is not acceptable here.
Candice, Matthew's idea that we have to find a language in which to discuss this, is this too idealistic? Are the political opportunities just too tempting for politicians that, each side knows, on the one hand, that they'd like to close down the debate by calling out racism, on the other hand, that they want to take advantage, for example, in this case, to drag Starmer's past as Director General of the DPP, to drag his past into the public eye. Are these temptations just too great? They can't be overcome.
See, this is why I would probably lean on the side of having an inquiry, a national inquiry, if you can set the terms of the debate quite well. So you can look at it in lots of multifaceted ways, like I just said. And then I think we can sort of get the moral reckoning that I think people want. I think the reason that the debate is so intense, one of it is, of course, that Elon Musk, one of the most well-known people in the world, has picked up this issue. But I think it has resonance at this particular time because we are discussing integration and immigration so much. And I think it's become an issue that's widely known. And I think having that sort of vociferous conversation is actually really good because in my experience, it always evens out in the end and we sort of accommodate to each other and we sort of figure out where we all are on things. I always think if you suppress things, then that causes an issue. And I think that's also why the debate is so intense. The issue is that you do actually genuinely embolden the far right when you suppress the issue. That's what you do. It's totally counterproductive. Whereas if you allow it to come into the open and allow people to have this sort of fierce debate, I always feel like it leads to better outcomes. And I think that's what we have to do. And I think the reason that the debate is sort of taking the tone that it is because it has been so suppressed and we haven't been able to discuss these issues properly. I really do genuinely feel that.
Well, Matthew, as an example of that very point, Scarlett began by saying that a good chunk of the public feels that multiculturalism has failed. She also said that when that was raised during the last Conservative government, Rishi Sunak rushed in to say, no, multiculturalism is a success. I mean, is it now permissible? Should it be? Is it taboo still to say that that you cannot say that multiculturalism has failed?
Well, I think it has been. I think certainly white politicians have been very scared of saying that. But actually, people like Trevor Phillips, who chaired the Human Rights Commission, which included, which the Commission for Racial Equality merged into, he said brave things about multiculturalism and said, look, let's have a much more nuanced debate. Not let's just stick with one word and say, we can't. We'll never make one word a shibboleth. Never make it an absolute sacred deity, as it were, because what happens then is what happened in the Netherlands. So it actually happened 20 years ago in the Netherlands, which is that you had, with Pim Fortuyn, the character who sort of started talking about these issues when nobody in Dutch politics would talk about it. My comrades in the Dutch Labour Party, they all stuck to the feeling that, you've got to, keep saying multiculturalism is a success. All, of course, pretty much all white. And what happened in the Netherlands is, all the white sort of working class support went to what people describe as the far right, now Geert Wilders' party, and on the actual, in terms of the minority voters, a whole section of Muslim voters left, and there is in fact an independent Muslim Labour Party in the Netherlands in Parliament. So you actually got squeezed from both ends. So I think politicians here need to think that if you don't have a frank debate, that could be your fate.
I'll just remind you that a government spokesman from the Home Office issued the following statement: no child should ever suffer sexual abuse or exploitation, and it's paramount that we do more to protect vulnerable children, which is why we are working at pace across government to drive forward real action. Thank you for my panel, Scarlett Maguire, Candice Holsworth and Matthew Lazar. Coming up, the Royal Society of Literature is facing further chaos this week after two of its chiefs resigned. Disputes there over free speech. Associate editor at The Critic, Sebastian Milbank, will join me to discuss. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Should we talk about the weather?
Yes.
Because apparently, all of this weather is leading to bunk off Monday, Dawn.
Yeah, this is the front page of the Daily Star, which is a very attractive picture of a potato on a couch. So everyone...
As if we haven't done enough of that over the last...
Everyone working from home today, hope you're having a nice time, because we're obviously not. Yeah, so sickies will double today. Bunk off Monday. Millions of workers call in ill to avoid the snow. Now, obviously, for many people, it's the first day back after the Christmas and New Year break as well. Many people have had 2 weeks off. And the weather gives you a bit of an excuse to maybe extend that break. Now, look, don't get me wrong, up in the north it is terribly bad, and we had airports shut at the weekend, football games being potentially called off, etc., and it was awful. However, in many parts of the country, certainly in London and the South East, it's just rain. There's just puddles out there, people.
There's no excuse.
Just go to work.
Down here.
And the security guy said he can't work from home. He can't work from home. He's got to come in, isn't he?
Well, there are so many. It does tend to be the working class jobs as well, the ones that you can't do from home. The people running the supermarkets, the people running the NHS, the people, the postman, the dustbin people. I mean, all these people are the ones that have to get out there no matter what the weather and get on with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's all these, you know, and we had stories over the other day, didn't we, about people working from home from a beach in Ibiza.
Exactly.
From Barbados. People working for local councils.
Yeah, I've got a few friends in corporate jobs today who've got the week off work.
Oh dear.
And have you affected by the weather over the week?
No, not so. Well, yes. My golf was cancelled.
Oh, my God! How did you...
Snowfall, my golf was cancelled. The mighty Woburn couldn't get it out there. Oh, can you believe it?
What?
But
Honestly, how did you...
Love them. My grandkids love the weather.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. The Royal Society of Literature has experienced difficult years ever since author Salman Rushdie's attempted murder in 2022, when the Society was accused of blocking a statement of support for Rushdie for fear that it might cause offence. The organisation has faced criticism. The RSL has also been accused of lowering its entry requirements in a bid to increase diversity. While the Society denies such accusations, how can it regain respect? With me now is Associate Editor at The Critic, Sebastian Milbank. Sebastian, welcome to this programme. Please tell us, what is the Royal Society of Literature and does it matter?
Well, the Royal Society of Literature, it's been going since the 19th century, and it's more or less, I mean, the simple way to put it is it's the establishment's sort of haven of literature. It's a traditional English institution that exists theoretically to defend the legacy and the practices of English novels and literature. And the problem is that what's happened is it's lost its way. So as your watchers probably know, there's been a lot of controversy recently. There's been resignations, and a large part of it has to do with the fact the Society has failed to defend Salman Rushdie. It's suppressed and censored many of its members, and there's now widespread outrage.
What has been that suppression and censorship? Tell me a bit about that.
Yes, I mean, there's been controversy about both criticisms and defences of Israel, about the kind of people who have been brought in. So with its recent director, it's taken on very consciously a sort of pro-diversity agenda. Like, the idea is it's very politicized. You've got to open things up. You've got to bring in people because of their skin color or their religion or their sex.
And it would be your argument, would it, that has had an impact upon standards? This is an organisation, an institution, which is supposedly about excellence. Is that not right?
Yes, well, I think that's exactly it. But when you dilute the integrity of an institution, you start losing your way, first in small ways and then in very large ways. So if we think of where we've ended up with, one of the most celebrated authors in the world, Salman Rushdie, someone attempted to murder him, he's been blinded in one eye, and the Society would not issue a statement condemning the attack, defending Salman Rushdie, because they thought it would be offensive. And you think, how have they got to that point? Well, they got to that point because they started, this has been years in the making. They started prioritizing things other than the quality of literature, the integrity of the organization, its tradition, and they prioritized these political, ideological ideas, and the distortion has simply grown. So that they no longer care about the quality of text, they care about the identity of the authors. They no longer care about, and it's ended up with them no longer caring about right and wrong, and instead caring about I mean, it's a common word on GBNews, but political correctness.
You've obviously studied this. In a way, we're not talking only about one institution, are we? I think it's a process that we've seen in a number of different places. Have you analysed how it begins? How does this worm enter the body?
Well, it begins in small ways. I think it begins by saying you look around you. You've got these older white authors. You think, well, there's an increasingly diverse country. There's this whole English-speaking world out there beyond England. You want more of those voices. That isn't necessarily a bad impulse, but the problem is that rather than saying we need to go out there and find authors of quality from different backgrounds, encourage people, give patronage to people, they instead say we've got to sort of synthesize diversity. It's not acceptable to have authors of quality of a white background. So instead of saying positively, we're going to help more diverse authors and try and find people who qualify, we're going to say that simply being diverse is itself a mark of quality. And that's the initial mistake, and everything just floods out from there.
I was just wondering whether these things within these institutions possibly spread upwards from the younger employees. We saw some examples in publishers, didn't we, of younger employees being in revolt, stopping the publication of literature of which they didn't approve. And they seem to have an extraordinary influence, although apparently they were junior staff. I'm just wondering, do you think these things also swell up from the junior staff towards the top of an organisation like the Royal Society of Literature?
Definitely. And I think there's also a specific dynamic whereby you get younger, more radical staff. But what will happen is that older people in the organisation will almost over-anticipate their radicalism. So they'll say, oh, we've got these younger people, we've got to get ahead of them. And so you have people doing things that they don't really believe. Like, I'm not sure that the people involved in this really believed that they shouldn't condemn the attack of Salman Rushdie. I think they were scared that they weren't supposed to.
Yeah. That's a very, very interesting analysis. In a word, are you optimistic that we're reaching a sort of peak with the corruption of these ancient institutions? Or, given that it comes from the young people, can we expect more and more of this as new generations enter?
Well, I think there's going to be a bit of a battle, because there's definitely a growing minority of thoughtful and educated young people who don't like this kind of thing. And I also think that the public patience for this has really run out. So, we've seen over the grooming scandal that we were just talking about on GBNews earlier, there's a sudden shift, like a sort of tectonic shift under the surface, and that people have run out of patience with this. The public, it's coming to public attention. It's not just in these institutions. So all of these kind of crazy things that have been happening in these small, closed elite circles, they're starting to kind of erupt into like public awareness. And they're not just answerable to, their younger staff members or a tiny sort of circle of like-minded people now. They're having to actually answer to the public. And I think that's changing everything.
That's very interesting. And we'll look out for your prediction. Thank you very much indeed, Sebastian Milbank. Coming up, I'll be talking to the award-winning photographer Cambridge Jones. He's got a new exhibition on the fall of the Berlin Wall. But first, your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Michael, thank you. The top stories. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has accused the Health Secretary of attempting to conceal the reality of the grooming gangs after he claimed the public discourse could risk vilifying certain communities. Wes Streeting had said the rhetoric around grooming gangs risked causing a second New Zealand mosque massacre, which killed more than 50 people. Mr Farage told The Telegraph yesterday that Mr Streeting's remarks were insulting. Well, that's now as Labour MP Dan Carden has broken ranks from the Prime Minister, joining Andy Burnham in his calls for a national inquiry into the scandal. Fury over grooming gangs has reignited in recent weeks after Labour blocked a national inquiry, backed by Kemi Badenoch and Elon Musk. Science Secretary Peter Kyle told Camilla Tominey this morning that Labour are dedicated to making a change for victims.
Bill that we introduced into Parliament this week, the Child Welfare Bill, had as its central commitment multi-agency cooperation for fact. We would deliver it, and the Conservatives tried to stop it. Now, we didn't just introduce this on the back of a national debate that's happened in the last fortnight. We planned this bill in opposition. We have been drafting it in government. We implemented it last week. There are things we are doing and actions we're taking, and we will continue to do so and deliver for those victims.
And the Chancellor will lead a new drive to tackle waste and inefficiency across the public sector in an attempt to get back on the front foot after a week of turmoil in the UK financial markets. Writing in The Telegraph, Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, said officials will work with the private sector to embrace their ideas, expertise and innovation to further our public services as part of the drive to clamp down on unnecessary spending. Rachel Reeves has been criticised, though, as she visits China to boost relations with Beijing, the Tories accusing her of having fled to China rather than explain how she'll fix Britain's economy. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride told GB News this morning that the Chancellor's judgment has been very poor.
Should not be in China at the moment, talking to the Chinese in the way she is, saying that she's got this £120 million a year additional funding coming into the UK economy, given that the moves in the bond market recently, partly at least, substantially at least, because of the decisions that she's taken, is costing us an estimated £12 billion pounds a year. That's enough to fund 300,000 nurses, for example. So, no, I think her judgment has been very poor, and very poor judgment around the budget, which is why we are in that situation.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. Now it's back to Michael Portillo.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, this is your latest GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. It's a misty start for some of us where we do have fog patches in play, particularly across eastern areas of England where high pressure is in charge at the moment, which means we've got light winds, so there's not much action to really help clear that fog out of the way. Elsewhere across parts of England and Wales, there will be some sunny spells in there to enjoy today, but it is going to be another cold feeling day across those southern and eastern parts. Temperatures really struggling for the time of year, particularly where that fog persists locally. We might see not much higher than 0 or 1 degrees Celsius. Further towards the west and the north, though, we are starting to feed in some much milder conditions. So 9 degrees Celsius out here, even for parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Here, though, it is going to be a much cloudier day. We've got outbreaks of rain starting to push their way in for the Western Isles and into the Highlands and Northern Isles also. The winds here, though, are going to be strengthening with gales pushing their way in for the northwest as we head throughout today and into the overnight period. Locally, they could turn severe during the early hours of Monday morning as well. Those winds, though, are pushing in from a southwesterly direction all the way from the Atlantic, so they're filtering in some much milder conditions, and by the time we reach Monday morning, temperatures will be reaching double-digit figures across parts of northwestern Scotland. It's another chilly night to come, though, in the southeast. Some patchy frost is possible again for parts of East Anglia down towards Sussex and Kent also. It will be a touch cloudier across England and Wales tomorrow. The sunshine hazier here, and we're going to start to see that band of rain in the northwest slowly push its way southwards, pushing into Cumbria, parts of Anglesey, the far northwest of Wales, so damper day to come here. But still very mild in the northwest, double-digit figures widely for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but again more around 5 to 7 degrees Celsius for England and Wales. That north-south contrast is going to continue throughout the rest of this coming week as well. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. My next guest has photographed 7 British Prime Ministers and Al Pacino and James Bond. But his latest exhibition is not a portrait. Rather, it focuses on the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 in a show at the Chelsea Arts Club. Cambridge Jones's shots offer a glimpse into a moment of history that shook the world. And he joins me now to talk about his extraordinary work. Welcome to GB News. What took you to the Berlin Wall as it was falling?
Can I just say 7 Prime Ministers and you? Because you helped me kick my career off.
Great.
I had a musician friend in a band called Dominic Waxing Lyrical who lived in Berlin, and he said, "You've got to get over here, something's happening." And I grabbed an artist friend, and we jumped on a plane, and he did charcoal drawings, and I photographed it. But it was sort of the first time I'd ever sort of taken my love of photography and done something, sort of kicked off a career.
You arrived in Berlin, and what was actually happening?
There was all this buzz that, is this going to happen? And it was like a festival environment. It was a bit like Glastonbury or something, but nothing had happened. And then everyone was saying it's going to happen. And then...
What, you get there and the wall is still intact?
Still intact. And the East German soldiers who you could see with guns, who had shot hundreds of people by now, were beginning to be quite friendly. And you can see in some of my photos them interacting with the West and with the Western soldiers. And my artist friend did a quick sketch of an East German soldier and kind of took it up to the wall, and he took it from him, and it was just a sort of, you could sense something big was happening. It was
how did it move from this this brotherhood across the wall to the wall actually being torn down?
Well, literally in the photos, people were taking chisels and hammers and knocking holes in it, and then bulldozers came in and sort of holes would appear. And I remember seeing people flee. I can't remember the names of those East German cars, but you'd see people... Trabants, thank you. Coming out with all their belongings and going... Because suddenly they were allowed to, having risked death to do it. And actually, a German came up to me at the exhibition and said, my family got out at that point, from the East to the West. And so it was an odd mixture of sort of celebration on the West and sort of a moment of opportunity in the East. Kind of, everything is changing. Let's get out of here.
I mean, for present-day viewers, some of them may not understand the significance of this. The wall had gone up overnight in, I think, 1961, if I recall correctly. And so between 1961 and 1989, the two halves of the city were simply not allowed to communicate. And as you say, if you attempted to climb the wall from the east into the west, you would be shot, and many people died. And so tell me a bit about what you felt. You were a young man, but you weren't from that culture.
Yeah.
You sensed the excitement, and you sensed the moment of history too, I imagine.
Totally. You kind of felt... And what we were allowed to do then was to go into the East, suddenly, probably more freely than you... Because Checkpoint Charlie had allowed people in and out, but suddenly we could just wander in and out. And a lot of my photos are actually the surprising nature of East Berlin and the kind of relative decrepitude of the buildings and the... you're half a mile apart and you're in an entirely different world. You just felt the lack of affluence and...
Although, of course, the greatest monuments of Berlin were in East Berlin.
Yes.
Unter den Linden, the Opera House, the museums, these were all in East Berlin.
Right, so sometimes the Western, and you may have even done this yourself, but you'd have these sort of entourages going through in their cars to see the opera or something. And the Brandenburg Gate as well was on the other side of the wall. In fact, in a lot of my photographs, you can see the Brandenburg Gate behind the East German soldiers. It recurs again and again, unintentionally. Wasn't there a famous story where somebody on the way to the opera, one of the politicians decided not... Do you remember this? And they used the fact that they weren't getting an answer to just... I think the East Germans wouldn't let them through or something until they got the answer. And also, wasn't the whole... You'll know more than I do about this, but wasn't the whole point that there'd been a miscommunication when they said, yeah, you can let them through, don't shoot them, open the wall up?
No, you know more than I do there. I've just been filming in Hungary, and that was interesting because the fence between Hungary and Austria was first unelectrified, de-electrified, right. And then people were allowed to pass through. And so when you got to Berlin, this was the this was the culmination of some events that had swept across Eastern Europe and were affecting the Soviet bloc. Let's just talk a bit about you and your career. So you've been mainly noted for shooting celebrities. How did you get into it all?
Well, honestly, I've brought this. This is the very first catalogue I ever had. Can I show that?
Yeah, you can show it, yeah.
So that is the catalogue in 2004. And I asked 120 famous people whether they'd be in my show, and you were one of the early people to say yes. And the whole theme of this was you had to choose your favourite piece of music.
Just tilt it from the top forward a bit. There we go. That's beautiful. Yeah.
And it was beautiful because, honestly, off the back of this, a whole career took place, and that's what's led to the 7. And you chose. Do you know what you chose?
You reminded me just before I came here. I chose Nights in the Garden of Spain by Manuel de Falla.
Exactly, and therefore we shot what looks like Spain in Granada, but actually is the top of a building in High Street, Kent. And it was through the generosity of people like yourself that a whole career took off. And it's just interesting to note that a moment of generosity can lead to that.
Well, that's fabulous. Whom have you most enjoyed photographing?
I've been such an extraordinary career. I mean, it literally goes from sort of Al Pacino through to Take That. The honest answer is it's not who, it's how good is the photograph.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So
no, I'm sure that is right. So tell me, which have been the best photographs that's come to your mind straight away?
Al Pacino. I did a whole shoot with Al Pacino, and it was rubbish. And he looked like my grandmother when he opened the door in LA. And then afterwards, he sat by the pool in the shade, just relaxing, and started talking to me. And I thought, that's the moment, I'll take him. By the way, as I left the house today, my wife said, oh, don't wear that jacket again. And I said, but it's Michael Portillo. Yeah. I can wear that jacket.
Exactly. Perfect excuse. So your exhibition is at the Chelsea Arts Club, but that's only available to members and guests.
Yeah.
So we jolly well hope that your Berlin Wall exhibition will move elsewhere before too long.
Yeah, or we'll get it online so people can see it online somewhere.
OK, super. Cambridge Jones, lovely to make your acquaintance again.
Thank you, Mike.
To re-establish contact. Thank you for coming in. Coming up, Sir Nicholas Kenyon will be here to discuss his encounter with the Venezuelan conductor Gustavo Dudamel and the legacy of the social programme known as El Sistema. But first, if you're in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Be nice to escape the grey.
Clear skies, here we come.
As clear as our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're about to jet off to the Mediterranean for some winter sun, then west is certainly best at this time. It's high pressure that's in charge across parts of Iberia into southern France to provide relatively fine conditions at the moment, but further towards Italy and around the Adriatic towards Turkey as well, we've currently got some heavy rain, even heavy snowfall across inland areas. This will be continuing over the next couple of days or so, but it's expected to ease during the forthcoming week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Teenage girls are out drinking their male peers in the UK at a greater rate than any other European country. Yes, more than a third of 15-year-old girls in the UK report getting repeatedly drunk, compared to less than a quarter of boys the same age. I suppose what I'd say to this is, boys, what are you doing? Pull yourself together. Well, joining me now is the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Larzer. Charlotte, you're going to have to speak up on behalf of girls the country over here. 15-year-old girls boozing much more than their male counterparts.
I think it's to do with the pain threshold, so we can handle hangovers better.
Do you get hangovers when you're 15 years old?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. I was drinking hooch and smelling...
Absolutely. Whatever happened to hooch?
Yeah. And I just think we can tolerate it better. Right. And I don't know, I grew up in that kind of wild child 90s drinking era. I'm showing my age a bit. And, God, we drank a lot as teenage girls. I mean, it's actually shocking now in retrospect.
Well, I also think in terms of boys versus girls, I wonder if we've got a bit of a thing about... I mean, the old cliche that girls develop quicker, they can become social quicker. They can certainly get into They get into the pub more easily because they look older.
Yeah.
You know, because of makeup, etc. I wonder if the boys are all just, you know, in their rooms playing on their devices, as it were. You know, as people increasingly dominated by screens. Whether in fact there's an issue about socialisation, about whether in fact, you know, the lads are not out there socialising.
They have little sips of wine in France from the age of like 12, and they're absolutely fine about it.
Yeah.
Whereas we all know what happens to British girls, because I was one of them. You turn, however, old enough to get a bottle of Smirnoff Ice, and boy, do you go for it, and until you're vomiting, basically.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. The Simon Bolivar Orchestra is set to play at the Barbican Centre on Wednesday and Thursday this week. Its music director, Gustavo Dudamel, has been labelled as the breakout star of El Sistema, the Venezuelan government's music education scheme, which gave a classical music education to all children, regardless of background. Former director of the BBC Proms, Sir Nicholas Kenyon, interviewed Dudamel recently and joins me now to talk about their conversation. Lovely to see you again, Nicholas. So, how did you find Dudamel? He's regarded as a superstar. Is that the way you found him?
He's a remarkably modest person, but he is phenomenally successful. You can tell he lives his life completely for music. It's all about communicating with musicians and making the music happen. I mean, when I first met him back in 2005, he was the poster boy for El Sistema, this amazing education scheme, and he was very, very boyish. He's still boyish now, but he is 43, so he is in that next rung up of international conductors. But considering that he could, with all his success, have made a career touring the world on a guest basis, conducting the big international orchestras and, you know, making the most of that, his commitment to Venezuela has been remarkable because he believes in this education scheme, El Sistema, and he is determined to support it, which is why the orchestra that's coming to London this week is the Venezuelan orchestra. Simon Bolivar, the great Venezuelan hero that it's named after, first appeared in Edinburgh and at the Proms back in 2007, made a huge impact because they wore, for the encores, they wore Venezuelan coloured jackets, about as outstanding as your tie, actually, Michael, and just lit the place up. And I think the question this week is, how has that music-making matured and progressed?
Why has El Sistema become controversial?
It's become controversial because, like all these massive schemes, it was set up in a very idealistic way to appeal to the government of the time as not just a cultural programme, but as a social programme, as a social programme that would reach and improve the lives of kids, you know, regardless of class, regardless of background. And I think within that, there are already obviously going to be some missteps, some problems in the way it works and so on. And in particular, there's been a book by a British academic, Geoffrey Baker, which has really retailed, but I really regret, has retailed anonymously and without proper sourcing, accusations of harassment, of controlling behaviour and that sort of thing, because Baker is someone who doesn't really approve at all of the essential discipline that lies behind orchestral life. I mean, that's what an orchestra is. People coming together to, in a sense, do what they're told by a conductor. And so it's a particular social model which some people find unattractive.
How has Dudamel negotiated these changing views about his country, Venezuela?
He has, at one point, he left Venezuela. He has settled, his home base is in Spain with his second wife. His parents live in Spain. And so his relationship with Venezuela, which had to be online through the pandemic and the period after that, he has now been back and is rehearsing with the orchestra. And I think his emotional commitment to the kids in El Sistema is absolutely total. And that's what comes across with great, deep commitment. And I think what he says is there are lots of problems in Venezuela, particularly with the recent re-election of Maduro, which was absolutely corrupt as far as we can tell in terms of the outcome of the election. But he says, I can only do what I do with the tools I have, and that is music, and I will go on making music.
More or less in a word, do you think it would be an exciting couple of concerts this coming week?
I think it's potentially absolutely thrilling. They are both sold out. So there's a sense of occasion about this. And where it goes from here, I think, is totally up in the air, but I think we can be sure Dudamel will be part of the international scene.
We were talking to Nicholas Kenyon there about Dudamel at the Barbican. Thank you very much, viewers, for huddling with me on this chilly day. In truth, I hope that our discussions today have generated more light than heat. I thank all my guests for joining me this week. I regard that as a great privilege. I'll be back next week. Dawn Neeson is coming soon. I wish you a very pleasant rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good afternoon to you. This is your latest GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. After being in control of our weather for a good few days now, high pressure is slowly losing its grip across the UK. It's going to be sinking more towards the southeast, whereas in the northwest we've got low pressure starting to bring frontal systems in. So already starting to see some outbreaks of rain for the far northwest of Scotland, some drizzly outbreaks across Northern Ireland as well this evening. Winds here are also going to be strengthening, very gusty around coastal areas with gales locally severe into the early hours of Monday morning. Some heavier pulses of rain from the far northwest as well towards dawn. A calmer, drier night to come for England and Wales, but here it is going to be quite chilly. Some patches of frost possible for eastern Wales across areas of England as well. So as you start off Monday morning, it is generally the southeast that is going to see the calmer and generally more settled conditions. There is going to be less sunshine around on Monday compared to what we are seeing today. It will be hazier in nature as this cloud is pushing its way in ahead of this frontal system that will be sweeping its way in for Northern Ireland, more widely now into areas of Scotland. Some heavy pulses of rain around the hills, but notice how much milder it is in the northwest. Temperatures 10-11 degrees Celsius here even as we start off Monday morning. All due to those winds that are feeding in that southwesterly theme. Again, they are going to be very gusty here right throughout the day. That rain will eventually slip its way into parts of Cumbria, the far northwest of Wales, also turning damper into the afternoon. Drier elsewhere for England and Wales. Once again, widely cloudy, though temperatures here struggling around 5 to 7 degrees Celsius, but widely double digits for Northern Ireland and Scotland. This north to south contrast is going to continue throughout a good portion of the forthcoming week. Northern areas will be milder, but also generally windier, more chances of seeing some rain around at times also. In the south, whilst drier for a part, it is going to see some fog around, particularly overnight, and it will be cooler in general as well. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
we'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000